Hello, I'm glad you decided to join us today. We're going to tell some stories, we're going to laugh a little bit, we're going to have a really good conversation about World War I, and we're going to hear some great music. So why go freshen up my tea? Why don't you join us here on the porch? Well, my favorite neighbor Tom's over today. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Had to stop by for something new.
Well, I appreciate that. You got time to hear a story?
Absolutely.
Well, I was thinking the other day, diners are really popular right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've got them on PBS and on the Food Channel, and every place is really trying hard to be a diner. It's the authentic diners that are just a few that really grab my attention. When I was a young man and a kid, the southern part of Knox County, about 25 miles south of here at Sanborn, at Monroe City, they had a place called Tick's. And Tick owned it. It was a pool hall. And you'd walk in the front, there was a lunch counter and the place where Tick would be cooking. And then they had a couple pool tables and they had a card game going in back. They always had a card game. And man, at lunchtime, it was busy with farmers coming in. And it was a unique place. Loved going there. Mainly only men. It was a real different time, but you didn't see too many women in there. Well, a local guy down there who has since passed on, a great friend of mine named Gary Schaus, great big guy, star of an old Monroe City Blue Jeans basketball team in the 50s. Gary came in one day from farming, and Tick always had his back. Tick would fix the food and then turn around and set it to you there on the counter. Gary comes in, walks by him and says, "Tick, 2 fish." Gary goes to the bathroom, washes his hands and get all cleaned up, ready for lunch. Comes back out, Tick's there cooking, and he's watching the people playing pool and cards and everything. And Gary hollers, "Hey, Tick, 2 fish." So Gary then goes up and sits down. About 5 minutes later, Tick turns around, one plate with 2 fish and another plate with 2 fish. And he says, "What are you doing?" He said, "You came in, you ordered 2 fish. You came out of the bathroom, you ordered 2 fish. That's 4 fish. So Gary sat there and ate them. But the moral of the story is, you got to be careful what you ask for. Joe, so good to see you here, to have somebody like the Jo Throckmorton that a lot of Hoosiers recognize as the guy that made the documentary on Assembly Hall. But congratulations on that. And when I was sitting here earlier, when I found out you were going to drop by, a director, a writer, a producer, college professor, you kind of do it all.
I'm also a professional porch sitter.
Well, you're doing it well.
Yes.
You're doing it
Yeah.
well. I was ecstatic when I found out you were going to do a documentary on the First World War. Shocked that most Americans know very little about it. It decimated a whole generation, brought an end to the British Empire, even though they were victorious. Started with Gavrilo Princips in June of 1914 when he shot the presumptive heir of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And that's about all I remember.
I was mostly looking at the United States involvement in the war. So that's kind of where our jumping off point was. So we're not really even engaged in this documentary at all about why the British Empire, why the German Empire, Austro-Hungarian, all of that is a different subject matter altogether.
So you focused on Indiana and people from Indiana that served.
Yeah, so the whole idea
Wow.
of the documentary was finding 7 subjects, all from the state of Indiana, and focusing on their involvement in World War I. So the name of the project is called Over There, Hoosier Heroes of the Great War.
from the song over there.
From the song over there, right? So we really pick up the action in really 1917. Now we talk about all the subjects before that time, but we really pick it up then and through the end of the war. And we're really focusing on their involvement and commitment. And so those 7 subjects involved the first soldier from the United States to die overseas. He was from Evansville.
Really?
We have the only Medal of Honor recipient from Indiana that's featured. We have an African American from Lyle Station near Princeton who won the Croix de Guerre and Distinguished Service Award. And he was one of our most decorated soldiers from Indiana too, which is unusual. And then we also have the first nurse who died overseas on French soil was from the United States.
And I mean
from Indiana.
The gentleman from Lyle Station won these service awards for his valor in a time when the military was segregated.
Right, he was served down in the Saint Dié sector, and he was attached to a French commander. They were part of the French forces down in that segment. What I found was really most interesting, though, is we went, part of this documentary, we went overseas and actually did taping of all of these locations for all of these soldiers, including this gentleman from Lyle Station. We did one on a soldier from my hometown, and we found the tree line in which he was killed and where he was originally buried. And I have a video I'd love to show you with one of the historians that we worked with who took us right to that location. Would you like to see that?
I'd like to see it right now.
Today I'm with Bruce Malone, who is a superintendent for ABMC at the Meuse Argonne American Cemetery, and I'm going to have him talk a little bit about a location that we found for one of the soldiers that we're featuring in our film.
Charles Forrest was in the 104th Regiment in the 26th Division, and we know around the time of his death, so I take the map of the 26th Division area, which was right in here, and I find out that the 104th Regiment was attacking uphill through the Bois de Haumont, which is just on the north side of the city of Verdun, and in a heavily wooded area. And around the time of his death, they would have been coming to the end of the woods, and most likely I would assume it was probably artillery fire coming down in the woods. But somewhere in that area is where he was killed, attacking early in the morning with his regiment. And then, using a different tool we have, these are the engineered drawings of all the temporary cemeteries and temporary and isolated burials after the war. And I have a spreadsheet with his name, and I was able to find that he was in on what they call Plat B223, which I found, and he is grave number 17, listed right here, complete with his serial number. And then examine the engineer's drawings a lot closer, and we find that right here in this field, just outside the woods, this is where graves 3 through 40 from this list are. What I'm going to describe is the 26th Division, and more specifically the 104th Infantry Regiment, and Private Charles Forrest, who with his unit was attacking up the hill in the woods you see in the distance over there. On the other side is very wooded, very rugged, hilly terrain, a lot of small cliffs and ravines through there. And they attacked up this way on the morning of October 17th, 1918. And they came under heavy artillery shelling and a significant amount of gas as well. And unfortunately for Private Forrest, he was killed in action just inside the tree line up there at some point. We don't know precisely where. But interesting here is we've come to the location where he and many of his comrades, about 45 or 50 of his comrades, who were killed in action about the same time, were initially buried in this field, this tall grass field right here, just where those trees kind of jut out into the field, into the little valley just to the right as we're looking at them. There were 40 graves right there, and grave 17 in the group was Charles Forrest. And there were some more graves in the woods on this side and some more graves in the woods on that side. So it's interesting to come out here to where the attack was coming through out of the woods in this direction toward the village of Flaba, which is right over there. And we're able to locate the place where the soldiers had their initial burials before they were moved to the main cemetery at the Argonne Military Cemetery, which today we know as the Meuse Argonne American Cemetery. Now, Charles later was repatriated back home, so he's not buried in France anymore.
Wow, that was absolutely fascinating. breathtaking, actually. Tell me, did you learn more little stories like that?
Well, what was interesting is every one of the soldiers and the nurse that we followed, we had great stories. And I'll tell you one very quickly, which was about our Medal of Honor recipient, who was from Madison, Indiana, and who lived through the war. But it was in October, he actually approached a small town called Cunnell, which is near the Meuse-Argonne American Cemetery. And he came out of a tree line, crossed a road, and went into a fence line at the bottom of a ravine where he took in mustard gas. And in that time, where he was taking in the mustard gas, there was a sniper to his right in a barn that he shot and killed. And there were two in about 150 yards away in a steeple of a nearby church in Cunnell, and he killed both of them from his location. He moved forward about 50 yards, and he came under attack from a machine gun nest that was housed in the corner of a house at the road. He also destroyed that, and then he advanced forward to an alleyway between that house and a barn, and as he got into the alleyway, he was attacked by another machine gun nest, which he took out with his rifle. And then as he went up beyond the village, through a field, he came under attack by another machine gun nest, and he fell into that area, and his rifle didn't work and his pistol didn't work. So as he was confronting another German soldier, he picked up their pickaxe, and killed two more in hand-to-hand combat with their pickaxe. And so he ended up taking out a number of machine gun nests by himself and a number of snipers, and then he returned to his position to tell them it was okay to advance.
Wow, that's something. Stay here, I want to hear more about this. When you were there in France and documenting World War I, how was that received since World War II kind of eclipses everything?
Actually, I was surprised myself. I mean, it's still very vibrant in terms of the memory. And there's still tour buses that come to World War I battlefields and also cemeteries. And as a matter of fact, all throughout that region from Belgium down, the cemeteries in some cases have families that have adopted a soldier's cemetery plot and will care for it for the year, and they actually have a waiting list to take on that task in order to learn about that soldier and care for that plot. So they very much remember it and respect it, and the memories are alive for World War I.
Well, it just seems like, students today, school students, have no idea about World War I. How hard is it to find information about Americans that served in World War I?
That's a great question, and to that point, before World War II, every high school student who studied history knew about the Battle of the Meuse-Argonne, which was the bloodiest battle that the American forces had ever been involved in our history.
Even more than the Civil War?
Even more than the Civil War.
Wow.
It was the bloodiest battle. And then after the Battle of the Bulge in World War II, no high school student remembered it. They just didn't talk about it anymore. So there was a clear delineation as to kind of when that happened. And World War I just sunk into the dark reaches and into memory. And now we have some great historians that are still on site at these cemeteries that help us in local historical societies. We have local museums, even like in Vincennes here in Indiana, those types of places that help keep that memory alive. But in order to try to find that information, you really have to dig deep, and I use a lot of research tools. And really what it comes down to is just hardcore detective work. That's how we find the information that we need.
Hey guys.
Nicole Carey, Director of WVUT's Broadcast Operations. What are you doing in Sanborn?
Oh, Joe, have you not told John yet?
So that was my job. So, yeah, I should have,
Tell
but
me
I kind
what?
of delayed
Tell
a
me
little
what?
bit. So, well, I'm sorry to say you're not in Sanborn anymore.
That's right.
So
Where am
where you are is you're in a TV show here in Vincennes, and Nicole's going to kind of explain that a little bit.
So you're
more.
actually in a studio with 3 cameras, including 3 camera operators, Paige,
Hey, Paige.
Julie,
Julie.
and Adam.
Hey, Adam.
And we can't forget Michaela, who is serving as our floor director.
Hi, Michaela.
We also have engineers, audio engineers, and a director in a control room who's actually making you look good on TV.
Do I look thin and have hair?
Of course. So your front porch, it's beautiful, but it's not a real front porch. It's actually a stage, and there's nothing behind it.
So where am I when I walk through that door?
You'll have to tell me.
Well, it seems like home. Oh my, I'm crushed. Well, I thought this was home.
So what do you think?
Well, it looks pretty good. Looks like it could be a front porch. Looks like it could be a real place. I guess it's the marvel of television. See, you learn more about Vincennes University every time I'm here.
The Vincennes University campus is filled with thousands of students each year, including our own broadcasting students who get to take part in projects like this.
Well, I know they do the news and they do great stories like this, so we're really appreciative of getting to have my front porch here in Vincennes and pretend it's at Sanborn.
That's right.
So you're not in Sanborn anymore, but I hope you like where you are.
You know, I do like who I am. This may not be real, but you know what is real? The people that are on the show. The stories are real, the musicians are real, and it's about Indiana. It's about what life's like and real neighbors. And we're going to get back and have some great musical entertainment. So stay with me here on the porch. John Kay, Traditional Arts Indiana. Can't thank you enough for stopping by, and you find so many talented Hoosiers. Who do we have with us today?
We have a couple of great musicians from Southern Indiana. We have Brian Allen on guitar, and we have Jim Smoak playing banjo. Jim Smoak's part of our elder music program that Traditional Arts Indiana does, where we produce recordings of older artists. Jim is really not just of Indiana significance, he's a national treasure for us. He's one of the founding fathers of that three-finger bluegrass style of playing, and really has just such a great legacy and a great story to tell us. Maybe you could play something you learned from your grandfather for us. What are you going to play for us, Jim?
Well, we're going to do this tune called Who's Going Down to Wilmington?
Sounds good.
Who's going down to town? Who's going down to town? Who's going down to Wilmington to come out to back around? Well, somebody sold my whole big dog while the witch said bring him back. Run them big dogs over the fence and a little run through the crack. Oh, who's going down to town? Who's going down to town? Who's going down to Wilmington to come out to back around? Now the jaybird pulled a two-horse plow. Sparrow, why don't you? Legs so long and stringy, well, I'm afraid I'll break 'em in two. Who's going down to town? Who's going down to town? Who's going down to Wilmington to come out to back around? Possum up the cinnamon tree, raccoon on the ground. Raccoon said, you son of a gun, now throw them cinnamons down. Oh, who's going down to town? Who's going down to town? Who's going down to Wilmington to come out to back around? If I had a needle and thread, fine as I could sew that pretty gal to my side, down the road I'd go. Who's going down to town? Who's going down to town? Who's going down to Wilmington to come out to back around?
Guys, that was some great music. Brian, tell me, how long have you been playing?
41 years.
41 years. Wow. Jim, I'm not going to ask you how long you've been playing.
Well, I wouldn't mind. You
Well,
know.
how many?
Actually, 70.
70
got my
years.
first job.
Now,
playing.
you used to play with Flatt and Scruggs.
Well, I played in a separate group sponsored by Flatt and Scruggs
And why did they sponsor another group?
because there wasn't enough of them to go around.
So you traveled.
We had to travel to the different television markets and do the shows live.
Oh, my,
There
did
was no
them live.
recording in those days.
Now, I noticed in the song, you started out with picks on your thumb and your first two fingers, then you took them off. Tell me why.
Well, the finger picking style began in the 1920s, and it's referred to today as Scruggs style because Earl Scruggs he took it to the world, you know, in movies and television, and but it was started by people just before him in North Carolina and South Carolina, and so when you take the picks off, you take advantage of that little fifth string a little bit more to give the banjo the sound that it had before the Civil War when the fifth string was added, and it gives it that galloping sound.
Well, I was ready to gallop. Now, who came up with this style? Do you know?
The picking style?
Yeah,
Or
back years ago. Then.
in the 1920s, there was three guys in the Carolinas, Rex Brooks, Smith Hammett, and Mac Woolbright. And they developed the three-finger picking style. Wow. But the guy who perfected it and put it on WBT radio in 1934 was Snuffy Jenkins.
Snuffy Jenkins. Now,
Snuffy
there's a
Jenkins.
name for you.
Yeah, there you go.
Well,
His name was DeWitt, but he called him Snuffy, so you pick your...
I'm going to have you guys play a song to get us out of here. What are you going to play?
Well, we thought we'd just do Back Home in Indiana.
Well, just hang on for 1 second before we have you. Director Jo Throckmorton, thank you so much for being with us today. Traditional Arts Indiana, the executive director, John Kay. Guys, it doesn't get much better than this, but let me share with you all. Life is pretty tough. We live in an imperfect world. And this week, if you're outside somewhere and you see somebody you can tell is having a rough day, give them a smile. May be the only one they get. Take it, guys.
Seems that I can see same old candlelight still shines so bright through those sycamores for me, where the new morning hay sends all its fragrance from those fields I used to roam. And when I dream about the moonlight on the Wabash, then I long for my Indiana home. Why, Brian?
Got a story, I'd like to hear it. Morning glories, both boats on the river. Sit a spell, sing a tune to yourself, and I'll join you on the porch, on the porch. Means everything to come home, spinning weather vanes.